The bridge by Kenneth T. Thibodeau. Long before the once campsite of the invading Roman legion under the command of Gaius Marius blossomed into the village of Armior, the bridge was constructed by the Roman engineers during the Cimbrian War, allowing the would-be conquerors to cross over the wide natural barrier that had its beginning somewhere deep inside the forest that cut an unrestricted pathway to the open sea several hundred miles away. The testament to the monumental feat of Roman engineering had stood undauntedly over the passing of time, as its 4 12-foot-high archways were made even stronger with the stones the villagers extracted from the river's edge, reinforcing the ageless crossing that kept the once small hamlet on the east side linked with the soil-rich farmland lying west of the sleeping Leviathan. The 4-foot-high pierced parapet that ran the length of both sides of the bridge, with its trefoil design and corbel ram heads that were evenly spaced every few feet under the bridge's wall, was more for support than decoration, as the high wall served as a protection, allowing all who used the ancient pathway to safely traverse over the river, as the wall kept them from falling into the deceptive waters below. Over the long centuries, the river had cut itself a path that was now wider and deeper than its deceptive appearance, and it was that slow washing away over time that now had both sides of its bank slanting at a sloping steep grade. Hidden below the seemingly slow-moving river's surface were even larger boulders that were once vomited up from the earth thousands of years ago, and the once tall and majestic trees that had grown close to the now steep slanting banks had fallen into the river along with other debris, until it had over the many years constructed a natural underwater barrier, making it impossible to safely traverse even when its surface waters gave the illusion to be moving at a slower pace. Those few souls over the expanse of time who had dared try crossing other than the bridge did so under a false promise of assured success, only to find themselves caught in the unseen death trap, as testified by their bleached bones that lay beneath the gentle flowing surface of the deceptive river. Not even during the coldest part of the year, when the icy hand of winter touched the earth, could the river's swift, deep-moving undercurrent be stayed or its rushing pace slowed as it made its way to the ocean. Beyond the river was an open valley with a lush green meadow countryside that lay before a rich wooded forest thick with trees. Even after centuries of contributing wood to build houses, barns, shops, and furniture for the villagers' homes, and the coffins for those buried in the expanding graveyard north of the village, along with its yielding a steady stream of firewood for the cold winter days and nights, the forest was still thick with a seemingly endless supply of trees awaiting the woodsman's axe. For those living west of the village of Armior, the ancient man-made pathway had allowed them to cross over nature's barrier with their bountiful harvest and safely return home again with those items needed to carry on a productive farm life. One such farming family was the Louvrieres, who owned the 2-story wood and stone frame farmhouse and a wood barn that was a stone's throw away from the bridge. Both the farmhouse and the barn were sectioned off by the 5-foot-tall wood log fence from the open acreage that ran east and south of the farm. Like the shops and homes of the village, the Louvrieres' farmhouse, barn, and the wood log fence were all made from the trees of the same section of forest that was several hundred feet behind it, and the stone facing of the front and side of the house and the 2 chimneys were made with the stones taken from the river's edge and had been hewn into smaller manageable pieces, making the foundation of the house stronger. The chimney on the back side of the house faced the village, and the second one on the far end of the house faced the forest and the large open pasture that now laid under a thick blanket of freshly fallen snow that had come sometime during the night. Since the time of the Normans, the Louvrieres had used the bridge to take their harvest to the markets of Armior and had brought back those things needed to carry on a quiet, successful farm life, and over the years, as the earth willingly yielded up her bounty to them, the once meager farm had become a strong, solid structure, and like the bridge of Armior for so many years, the Louvrieres' farm had become a part of the surrounding landscape, giving the seemingly illusion that it too was able to endure as long as time itself. However, the deadly disease of war that had spread itself across the continent of Europe had found its way to the village of Armior, the bridge, the Louvrieres' farm, and the last seedlings of the Louvrieres family, who were all now caught in its inescapable grip. And as the war had done to so many of the man-made structures as it swept across the landscape of Europe, the bridge, the Louvrieres family along with their farm, could be reduced to a vanishing memory by the next shell that the Americans' artillery were hurling at the Germans that occupied the farmhouse and the barn. Huddled in one of the cellar's corners, rose Maria Louvrieres, a dark-haired woman in her late 20s, made a vain attempt to shield the two younger children with her body from the shelling that rocked the farmhouse. As the earth shook from the exploding shell, she whispered a prayer asking God to make the shelling to stop and send the soldiers away. But if he couldn't, she wanted the next shell to either hit that cursed bridge or allow it to strike this cellar where they had taken refuge and end their unbearable torment. This war had taken away almost everything that Rosemaria loved, and now all that was left of the world that she had once knew, enjoyed, and held so very dear was in the root cellar with her, and having to live another moment of this hellish shelling to her would be worse than living in any of the German death camps that she had heard about. As to why the Germans hadn't blown up the cursed bridge once the last of their retreating soldiers had crossed it this morning, and by doing so cut off their American pursuers, she didn't know. But because they hadn't, the struggle between the Allies and German armies that had engrossed Europe over the past 6 months now cut its hellish path to the once peaceful village of Armior. When the news of the advancing Allied army reached the village 3 days ago, she came here with her brother's 2 children, thinking that they would be safe at the family's farmhouse rather than in town should the Germans make a stand in the village. But as she watched from the front porch late yesterday evening as the Germans were moving their heavy artillery, tanks, and troops across the bridge as they left out of Armior, heading westward down the road that cut through the forest, she had a quiet moment of celebrated relief, as she was sure that most of the people of Armior as well were glad that their unwelcomed guests who had occupied Armior over the past several days were leaving. Nor were there any celebratory envoy to meet the American liberators, as terrified villagers who, like she and her family had done, also sought refuge where they could find it from the hellish cries of war that now screamed out all around them. For those who had been on the east side of the bridge when the Americans came into Armior, they were now probably far behind the war zone or in a safer place in the village, and had she and her family members been in Armior, they too might have escaped the horror of the shelling by the Americans, who were trying to drive the Germans away from the bridge. Looking over at her grandfather, Rosemaria saw him mouthing a prayer as he clutched in his hands the rosary beads with the small silver crucifix. Kneeling next to Rosemaria's father was her aunt, who crossed herself then quickly covered her ears as the sound of a screaming shell was heard, while an exploding shell hit the ground, rocking the earth as if trying to awaken it from its deep winter sleep. Once again Rosemaria pressed the children closer to her as if her tight embracing of them could shield them, as the cellar was rocked again by the shells that exploded somewhere in the forest that sent men, equipment, parts of trees, and snow flying. Standing on the front porch of the farmhouse opposite Lieutenant Engels, with the aid of the field glasses that a moment before was in the case that was strapped to his holster belt, casually raised them to his eyes and watched with intense interest at the Americans, who now occupied Armior, as they went quickly about shoring up their defensive position along the riverbank just outside the village, as they too, like his men, were dug in on their side of the river just out of rifle range of each other. And unless any ventured too close to the bridge, neither German or American would carelessly throw his life away. Whoever this American commander was, he seemed to be intent on capturing the bridge of Armior intact, as much as Oberst Lieutenant Engels was in keeping the Americans from doing so, at least not until he had it blown up. A task that would have to wait until nightfall now, as somehow during the rush to get the heavy artillery with their ordnance and tanks across the bridge, the truck with the explosives had been moved with the retreating column as well, and by the time that mistake had been discovered, forward units of the advancing American army had moved in from the south, pushing their way into Armior. And now that lost opportunity had come at a great cost, as he had already lost several engineers, half a squad of men, and a half-track that had been deployed to stay off the Americans while the engineers attempted to set the explosives under the bridge. Oberst Lieutenant Engels was in command of the rear guard, which was a full company of Panzer Grenadiers and conscripts, a Tiger tank that was near the barn, as it was now out of commission because of a damaged tread track wheel resulting from being hit by a bazooka team during the Americans' attack on the village. A half-company mortar team that would cover their withdrawal once the objective was reached. Also assigned to the rear guard were several good engineers who were to set the explosives, and as soon as the bridge was destroyed, Engels would use the 2 remaining half-tracks in getting as many of his men out of this death trap. By the American commander having his snipers, who were well hidden in the shops and houses that faced the river, made it possible for them to pick off any of Engels' men that ventured too close to the river's edge, which in itself was a death trap, and the only way to end the standoff between him and the American commander was to destroy the bridge. But in order to do that, the engineers had to get onto it, and once they would have to be lowered by rope to get the explosives under the bridge's stone supports, which now could be done only under the blanket of night. And once it came out, Lieutenant Ingalls would send under a Fizzier Wolf, a squad of his best rifle infantrymen, his 2 snipers, along with the engineers to finish the job of cutting off the advancing Americans. Like his American counterpart, Lieutenant Ingalls had ordered his best infantrymen to occupy the trenches near the river edge, and flanked several yards along on both sides of the bridge was a machine gun nest, as well as one in the second-story hallway window facing the bridge, and another one in the loft of the barn. There were troops with assault rifles who were equipped with steel hand grates, Panzerfaust, and his anti-tank weapon crew was located near the farmhouse should any of the American tanks get across, and the disabled Tiger tank could still be employed should the need arise, which he didn't foresee. That is, unless the American commander was very foolhardy to order another assault on the bridge like he had done twice before, and Lieutenant Ingalls was sure that should he do so, the American commander would lose more men than any tanks he sent into the devilish crossfire that Ingalls' men had put on the Americans twice before that kept them from crossing the bridge. Those 2 failed attempts had cost the American an anti-tank gun, a tank, along with several brave soldiers whose bodies now litter the bridge that pointed the way to their failed objective. Once again, as Lieutenant Ingalls looked toward the village through his field glasses, they briefly reflected the light of the bright sun that was slowly and steadily making its way up the eastern sky toward mid morning. "God damn it, Sergeant, I don't care if the boy is a damn green Martian. He's alive, and right now we need every damn man we can get, even drivers. Now, unless you know how to make the Germans see double, I suggest that you take that damn soldier, get him a goddamn weapon, and get your ass out of here and cross." Captain Davis' last words were drowned out by the firing of the 3 Sherman tanks that were supporting Bravo Company in their effort to drive the Germans from the farmhouse on the west side of the Armior Bridge so that 1st and 2nd Armor along with the 2nd Brigade of 1st Army could cross over to the other side of the river. But the advance was being held at bay by an unknown number of Germans, which probably included Pathfinders and maybe elements of the 3rd and 6th Parachute Regiment, plus forward spotters reported seeing at least 1 Tiger tank near the farm, as experience told Davis that if there was 1 Tiger seen in the neighborhood, it was safe to bet that there would be a few well-hidden ones in the woods that could be used as support for the defenders of the farm and keep Davis from capturing this vital objective. That would allow 2nd Brigade to advance and hook up with 1st and 3rd Brigade, who were racing to flank the retreating Germans from the northwest. Not only had that hellish crossfire stopped Sergeant McPherson and 2nd Squad first attempt to cross, but in their second attempt Davis had ordered 2 of the 4 Sherman to support them. Now he had lost a tank along with their crew to those damn Panzerfaust teams, plus 1 T-48 gun motor carriage, as well as several more good men who had been cut down by those 2 machine gun nests set up near the west end of the bridge. Now the bridge was littered with a number of dead bodies of both Germans and Americans, a burning Sherman, a disabled T-48, and an abandoned German half-track that had been knocked out of commission in the initial assault of the bridge, all of which made it impossible now to get any tanks or heavy assault vehicles to give support to the troops in a 3rd attempt to cross over to the west side, which meant that the German troops who were now entrenched around the farmhouse would have to be driven out by infantry before the wreckage could be cleared off the bridge. Of course, Davis could easily dislodge the German troops by just leveling the whole farm and all its occupants, but orders had come down through the chain of command to take the bridge outside Armior intact, plus knowing that Captain Sutherland's artillery company couldn't hit a bull in the ass with a banjo, Davis was taking a big risk of ordering Sutherland to lay down an artillery barrage on the field on the far side of the farmhouse along the open field and the road that led into the forest some 400 yards west of the farmhouse. His having Sutherland of doing so was to keep any German troops or tanks from coming up to give support to the occupiers of the farm, at least not without paying a very high price in human life to complete the job of blowing up the bridge or getting more support to the lone defenders of the farmhouse. What started out as a small firefight between the advance patrol of 1st Squad led by Corporal Knox, who had ran into elements of the German rear guard of the retreating 5th Panzer near the town of Armior early this morning, had by 0730 disrupted the deep winter sleep of Armior and sent the citizenry running for the safety of their cellars as the firefight had now escalated into the battle for control of the Armior bridge. As to why the Germans hadn't blown the bridge when the last of their heavy equipment had crossed didn't concern Captain Davis now, nor did he care. All he knew was that the bridge was intact, and it was going to stay that way if he had anything to do with it. And thanks to his well-placed snipers and best riflemen who were in several of the houses and shops that faced the river, he was able to keep the Germans' engineers from completing the job of laying the charges and blowing the bridge. Davis knew that the only way to get to the other side was the bridge itself, and even if he had sent any of his men down the embankment to cross the river would be a waste of good men, and those who didn't drown would be easy targets as they tried to make their way up the west embankment along the river's edge. The only thing that Davis lacked were enough boots on the ground, and with the loss of 2 squads of Bravo Company in the taking of the village of Armior, and the loss of a number of troops in the first 2 attempts of trying to cross the bridge, he didn't have enough men to complete the job after deploying what was left of his company along the river to provide covering fire for what was left of Sergeant McPherson's squad, who was to make a 3rd attempt to cross. To him, any and every able-bodied soldier that came his way was pressed into service, and that would include Father Albright if he had to. Even the 2 Negro truck drivers of the 514th Quartermaster Corps, who had brought up the 2 truckloads of ammo, Davis didn't think twice to press them into service. "Come on," McPherson snapped to the young dark brown-skinned soldier, who didn't look like he'd had his first shave judging from his smooth-looking face. "What do they call you, boy?" McPherson growled as the 2 were walking out the back entrance of the shop where Davis had headquarters set up at. "My name is Absalom Scott, sir," came the reply of the young Negro soldier that had the rough-faced first sergeant giving the private a hard stare for a brief few seconds. The way he had said his name and the tone in his voice gave McPherson the impression that he was supposed to have known it without asking. "What kind of?" McPherson's words were cut off by the sound of an artillery shell rocketing across the sky that had them quickly ducking their heads down. "So where is your weapon?" McPherson asked. "Back in the truck, sir?" "Well, you don't have time to run and get it," McPherson snapped, reaching for a M1 Garand that was in the back of the Jeep the 2 were now standing next to. "You've used one of these since basic, right?" "Yes, sir," Absalom replied. "Well, seeing that Yancey won't be needing it anymore, you can use his," McPherson said, then tossed the rifle and the blood-stained ammo belt to Absalom, who with a stiff outstretched arm caught them so not to get hit in the face. While trying to keep pace with the fast-walking rough-toned sergeant as the 2 began weaving their way through the desolate village, Absalom checked the weapon to see if it was loaded, which it wasn't. Quickly taking a full clip from the ammo belt that was now around his waist, he loaded the rifle, avoiding getting M1 thumb like he'd gotten the first time loading a M1 Garand during basic. After shouldering the borrowed rifle, he was able to keep pace with McPherson, who now had a smug smile chipping its way across those thin-chapped lips that was a part of that short stubble whisker-covered cheeks and chin of the rough-faced first sergeant. Of course, this wasn't what Absalom had in mind when Sergeant Williams volunteered him and Franklin to make the supply run up here. "Just take 'em up there and get your black asses back here as soon as you finish," Williams had barked, "and don't forget to get those goddamned papers signed this time." The simple run of taking the supplies to the front for the 4 Sherman tanks and the artillery company that were supporting what was left of the elements of Alpha, Bravo, and Charlie companies of 1st Army, who were giving chase to the retreating 3rd Panzer Armored and the 95th German Infantry, had led them by way of Armior, and that had Absalom and Franklin playing a game of hide and seek with them, as they weren't where Williams had said they were, and once they found them it was Absalom's unlucky task to be picked to stay while Franklin got to drive the company messenger back to HQ. But bad luck or not, Absalom didn't say anything to Davis, nor was he about to say anything to this mouthy sergeant about him needing to get back to the supply depot like Sergeant Williams told him and Franklin to do. even if it would get him into hot water with old Bulldog Williams later. The last thing Absalom wanted was for this dog-faced first sergeant snarling at him about his manhood. "Okay, here we are," McPherson said as their short trek had them soon reaching a heavily damaged two-story house. "So what's the word, Sarge? We getting leave?" the smiling soldier asked, who seconds before had been looking out of the window. "Right, Puklicki," the soldier with the Thompson submachine gun replied. Absalom saw that the soldier was wearing a 10-cell ammo pouch that was strapped over his shoulders that fitted him like a loose vest. "Yeah, sure thing," McPherson said with a quick crooked smile, "just as soon as we cross the bridge. And I guess he's going to drive us across," the sandy-haired soldier with the bright green eyes said, pointing to Absalom. "Is that right, boy?" the soldier with the southern drawl asked, smiling. "You're going to drive us across that bridge in that Red Ball Express truck of yours?" "He's a replacement," McPherson replied. "The hell you say?" the soldier with the southern drawl snapped. "A nigger?" "You mean they sent us?" Absalom felt his back bristled at the soldier's words. "Watch your mouth, Grayson," McPherson said, cutting him a hard look. "He's a soldier, and unless you want to talk to Captain Davis you need to shut your damn mouth, and that goes for all of you," McPherson added, looking at the others. "Now you got about 5 minutes to make your peace with God, cause we are going back to the bridge." "Is Davis crazy?" the soldier with the Browning automatic rifle said. "No, he's not, and since you're so eager to go, Person, Anson is with you. Now get your asses in gear and follow me, girlies." "Tough luck, Glenn. With that old boy on your ass we ain't gonna need to paint a bullseye on you for those damn crots to spot you," Grayson said, smiling. "Shut up, you damn hillbilly," the soldier with the heavy Spanish accent said as the group filed out of the house by way of what was once a part of the wall of the front room. "So where are you from, Anson?" Puklicki asked. "My name is Absalom, and I'm from Weston's Freedom Town," Absalom told him. "Yeah," Puklicki said, looking at Absalom. "And where's that?" "It's in New Mexico," the Spanish soldier said. "Hey Valdez, is there any place you don't know where it's at?" Person said. "Yeah, your brain," Valdez said, smiling back at Person. "Well, that's not hard to find. Just tell him to open his fly and he can show it to you," Puklicki added, smiling. "Kiss my ass, Puckley," Person snapped. "Only in your dreams, baby cakes, only in your dreams," Puklicki said as he took the last drag from his cigarette before flicking its butt away. "So what kind of name is Absaloni?" Glenn said, looking back at Absalom over his rifle that was across his shoulders as he rested his arms on it. "He said his name is Absalom, you jerk," Puklicki said. "Yeah, that's what I said," Person said with a half-smile. "It's Hebrew," Absalom replied. "Hey, ain't that name from the Bible?" Puklicki said. "Puckley, what would you know about a Bible?" Valdez chimed in. "Mex boy, you ain't the only one who can read a book," Puklicki shot back. "Oh, so you can read, Puckley?" A now smiling Person said, only to get the Italian salute from him that had the group, with the exception of Absalom, chuckling at the response. "So are you Jewish?" the sandy-haired soldier with the bright green eyes asked. "Damn, I ain't ever met a black Jew before," Grayson cut in, looking at Absalom, flashing a crooked smile that showed off his heavy yellow-colored teeth. "Heard about them, but ain't never seen one before." "Grayson, you ain't never seen nothing until you left that one mule town you came from in Alabama," Glenn said, smiling. "I ain't from no damn Alabama, I'm from Georgia," Grayson shot back. "What's the difference? You're a southern county hick no matter where you come from." And he didn't say that he was Jewish, he said his name was Hebrew. The stocky soldier carrying the M1 carbine rifle snapped. Absalom looked at the big man as the carbine looked more like a toy in the large hands of the giant. "And if you in Person would stop chattering like a couple of damn monkeys long enough and listen. Look, Harrison, I heard him, and I know for a fact that all Jews speak Hebrew. After all, I am from New York," Person said, looking at the giant. "Hell, you can't throw a rock." "Well, being from there ain't anything to brag about," Valdez said, smiling. "At least I ain't no damn Puerto Rican," Person said. "That's Puerto Rican, you dumbass," And I'm Mexican, there is a difference. Valdez said. Like what? You speak a different kind of Spanish? The soldier with the Thompson submachine gun asked, smiling. QTE Joe Don Gillipoles. Valdez snapped. So Valdez, is that Puerto Rican or Spanish you're speaking? Grayson asked, smiling. His remarks got a round of chuckles from the other soldiers, including Sergeant McPherson. Absalom welcomed the antics of the soldiers as their peppering each other with racist retorts had taken their attention off him for the time being. Since joining the army, he had seen and learned a lot about white folks, and he was surprised to see just how quickly this group turned on each other given the seriousness of what they were about to face, causing him to wonder as to how they ever made it this far in combat by the way they were going at each other. The only difference about this conversation that he was now listening to, and of those of the guys in his unit who often carried on the same kind of talk when they were out of the earshot of a white non-commissioned officer, was these were white soldiers and not Negroes. Absalom noticed that Sergeant McPherson, who was walking just ahead of the group, acted as if he didn't hear the conversation of his men. But like all sergeants, Absalom knew that McPherson could cuff this group of misbehaving boys with just a word. Okay girls, hold up here. McPherson said, that had them stopping near a destroyed German half-track located several yards from the bridge. Studying the side of the half-track that he was now kneeling by, Absalom saw that a shell fired from a Sherman had ripped a large hole through the thin metal plating of the vehicle. There were also telltale signs of dry blood mixed with human flesh, bone, and pieces of German uniforms of the soldiers who had once occupied the half-track. Beside the hole made by the shell fired from the Sherman, Absalom also saw that the left treads of the half-track had been blown off its tracks, and figured that the vehicle must have been hit first by a bazooka team, rendering it immobile, thus making it an easier target for the tank's gunners who had finished off the half-track, as well as the German soldiers riding in it. Look son, I know this is probably your first action, McPherson said, looking Absalom in the eyes for the first time since their meeting. So this is how it works. You'll provide cover fire for person here when he's reloading the Browning automatic rifle, so you move when he moves and shoot when he's not. Person, McPherson said, turning to him. I want you and Scott here to work your way up the left side of the bridge, and you James, he continued, turning his attention to the soldier with the Thompson submachine gun, take the kid here and work your way along the right side. And watch the fire from those damn machine guns, especially the one on the right, and try and stay behind cover as much as possible. I'll have the rest of the squad keep those boys along the river pinned down. Yes sir, Absalom said, eyeing the words that came out of McPherson's mouth. Mouth feels dry? McPherson asked, looking at Absalom. Yes sir, Absalom replied. Well, there's cool water in that well on the other side of the bridge, McPherson said, then flashed a quick smile that revealed a few missing teeth. You can get a drink from it if you want one. Okay girlies, same drill as before. The Shermans are going to fire off some smoke shells, so wait till it builds and work your way across. Say Sarge, I've got a better idea, Pew Clickley said, smiling. Why don't we fire the smoke and send the Shermans across the bridge? Get ready to move, McPherson said, and watch the damn crossfire from those machine guns. Came McPherson added, warning. Crouching behind the destroyed half-track with the other soldiers, Absalom tried to picture the faces of his parents and his young sister Carrie, but all he could recall of them were their tear-filled dark brown eyes on the day they went with him down to the train station to see him off to boot camp. It was the first time he had seen his father crying, making that one of the saddest moments that Absalom could recall in his 19 years of living. Now a year later, he wasn't sure if he would ever get a chance to see them again or see the end of this day. You should have mailed that letter, he thought, and in a frantic moment he began to search with his right hand each of his pockets for it. Hey, $10, say the nigger runs, Grayson said, smiling at Absalom. The sound of the Sherman firing broke the hard stare Absalom was giving the smiling soldier. Let's go, McPherson yelled. Moving quickly from behind the destroyed half-track, the group took up their positions at the edge of the bridge, and as James and the kid went off to the right, Person and Absalom moved off to the left, with Absalom keeping pace with Person, who acted as if Absalom was chasing after him. God damn it, I hate these damn crowds, Person snapped as the sound of bullets began zipping out of the cloud of smoke. So what does your name mean? Person asked. The question was asked with such a calm tone of voice that it caught Absalom off guard, as the now smiling soldier had asked it as if the two were having a quiet conversation at some bus stop or train station rather than about to try and cross a bridge under the hail of machine gun fire from an enemy that could care less about Absalom's skin color. As far as the German soldiers were concerned, Absalom was wearing an American uniform, and that made him the enemy, which was all that mattered to them and not the pigment of his skin. It means leader of peace, Absalom said. You don't say, Person said with a friendly smirk as several bullets chipped away pieces of the bridge they were now crouching behind that sent small chunks of the stone's wall scattering. The look Person gave Absalom caused him to smile back as a sense of peace overcame him that had the dryness in his throat now wet with his own saliva. Okay then, let's go, leader of peace, Person said, then quickly crossing himself, after which he took the Browning automatic rifle off safety and set himself to move. Both men moved quickly to the burning Sherman that was on the bridge, and just as Person was about to take a quick peek around the front of the tank, several bullets skipped off the front right side of the tank and took down James and the kid, who had made their way as far as Absalom and Person along the right side of the bridge. God damn it, Person snapped on seeing the two men collapsed after being hit. This is as bad as D-Day, Person said. Looking over at James and the kid, Absalom noticed a dead German soldier, who looked even younger than the kid. The lifeless light blue eyes of the German were staring back at Absalom with a look of amazement, as if witnessing a very curious sight. Yeah, that's right, a colored soldier, Absalom thought, looking into the face of the dead German. It was then that a half-amusing smile flashed across Absalom's face. This was the last place anyone would expect to see a Negro soldier, at least one who was doing something other than driving a truck or cleaning a latrine. Okay, cover me, Person said as his nudging of Absalom brought the young soldier back to the bridge. Then follow me over there, he added, pointing to the T-48 that was several yards away from their location. Ready? Person asked, studying the young Negro's face for a brief moment. Sure, came Absalom's reply, and without thinking he popped out from behind the tank, took aim at the German soldiers who were in the trench on the left side of the bridge, and could clearly make out their faces that were now vividly etched in his memory. While firing off a full clip of his M1 at the Germans, he saw two of them drop out of his sight from either being hit by the bullets fired from his rifle or having quickly taken cover out of his line of fire. The familiar pinging sound of the ejecting clip had Absalom quickly stepping back behind the cover of the disabled tank, and saw that Person had safely made it to the T-48 and was motioning to him to move up. Now who's going to cover me? Absalom heard himself saying while reaching for a fresh clip, pushed it into his M1, then set himself to make a run to where Person was. Unconsciously he once again looked at the bodies of James and the kid. God damn it, Absalom, come on, Person yelled on seeing Absalom crawling over to the kid's body. When Absalom reached the kid's body, he heard someone mumbling, and looking over at James saw the wounded soldier's lips moving. Say, buddy, are you okay? Absalom asked the wounded James, but he didn't reply as another round of machine gun fire skipped near James' head. Grabbing James by the collar of his uniform, Absalom quickly pulled him back to the cover of the tank, and as he did it was hard to tell if the fresh trail of blood that now marked the bridge was from James or from the small pool of blood of the kids that he had drugged James through when pulling him back behind the safety of the tank. Take it easy, buddy, Absalom said to James before reaching for the Thompson, after which he grabbed the kid by his jacket collar and pulled him back over to the tank. Taking the 10-cell ammo pouch vest pack off James, whose face was growing paler as he continued to mouth his prayer, Absalom quickly put it on, then took two M1 Grand clips from the kid's ammo belt, with the two-pocket hand grenade carrier that the kid had on him, checked the contents of the carrier before slinging it over his right shoulder, after which he signaled to Person that he was ready to make his run to the T-48, and as Person fired off several rounds of the Browning automatic rifle, Absalom started his run. What the hell were you doing back there? A frustrated Person snapped. I had to get a few things at the market, Absalom said, smiling. Were they dead? Person asked, looking back toward the destroyed tank. One of them was, but the one I got this from, he pointed to the vest, I don't know about. Absalom went on to say, glancing back where he had left James. Well, next time just leave them, that's why we have medics. Person said, checking the clip that a second before he had ejected from the Browning automatic rifle. I think you got 2 of them with that first clip you shot. Person said as he checked his magazine. Yeah, I think I did. Absalom said with a look of satisfaction. So do you want to see if it was luck? Person asked. Sure. Absalom replied. See that half-track? Person asked. Sure. Absalom replied with a grin. That's our next stop. Person told him, smiling. Right. Absalom said, rechecking his rifle to make sure he had a full clip. Ready? He asked Person. Yeah. Person replied, then took in a short deep breath, then quickly exhaled it. Go. Absalom yelled, then popped out from the backside of the T-48. As he did before, he took aim at the Germans in the trench to his left, only this time he saw that there weren't as many as before. Quickly he fired off a full clip, only this time, when the empty clip ejected rather than taking cover, Absalom quickly popped in a fresh clip and fired off 8 more well-placed shots that took down a few more Germans. When the empty clip self-ejected, Absalom stepped back behind the cover of the T-48 and reached for another clip from his ammo belt. Even though he felt and heard the pounding of his heart racing, he saw that his hands were steady as he quickly pushed the fresh ammo clip into the M1. A smile lit Absalom's face as he recalled how as a little boy he used to practice with his slingshot, shooting cans and rocks that he would set up on the back fence that quartered off the backyard of his parents' 2-story wood frame house from the open acreage of their ranch. Just like he was doing now, he squatted behind the old wood wagon, then jumping from behind his place of cover he would shoot at the rocks and cans he'd place on the top rail of the fence, trying to hit as many he could while counting to 10. But unlike then, the objects he was now shooting at were shooting back at him. As time went on, he could pick off the rocks and cans with greater accuracy and more of them before he got to 10. Got to keep your cool under fire. Don't get excited or lose your concentration while the enemy is shooting back at you. His grandfather once told Absalom after he had watched his grandson practicing his marksmanship with a slingshot. Old Captain Bell used to tell us that a good soldier could fire 3 shots in 1 minute, but I got 5 off. Absalom recalled his grandfather telling him. His grandfather had been a runaway from a Virginia plantation during the Civil War, and after making his way north he soon joined the Union Army. Hell, I told him the reason I was so fast was because I didn't want those Rebs getting me before I got them. When he turned 14, his grandfather began to instruct him in the handling of a rifle. That included the old Henry repeater rifle that his grandfather used in the Indian Wars against the Apaches, and the Springfield rifle Absalom's father brought back from the Spanish-American War. A good marksman sees more than just his target. He sees the whole field. His grandfather told him as he swept the air with his left hand, he takes in everything in his field of vision. Then with his bony finger he pointed to the young boy's head, then at Absalom's right eye. Pick your target, aim, and shoot all at once and you'll hit your mark every time. His grandfather had so often told the young rifleman. In basic training, Absalom's skill as a rifleman had even impressed his drill sergeant, Staff Sergeant Francis Raymond "Ramrod" O'Kelly, who was one of the meanest men, colored or white, that Absalom had ever met. "Goddamnedest shooting I've ever seen." O'Kelly's words now sang in Absalom's ears. O'Kelly had watched as Absalom placed 8 rapidly fired shots of the second full clip from his M1 rifle into the bullseye target of the rifle range, then placed the second 8 shots in a tighter pattern of the bullseye than the first 8 shots. Afterward, O'Kelly had Corporal Davis to go get a M1903 Springfield from the armory. "Now let me see what you can do with this, boy," O'Kelly said, holding the rifle out to Absalom. And as Absalom was loading the Springfield rifle, O'Kelly had the target that Absalom was to fire at moved 1,000 yards back. Then O'Kelly, Corporal Davis, and the rest of the company watched as Absalom placed his first 5 shots he had fired in a tight grouping in the bullseye, and the second 5 shots in the same hole of his first shot fire that was dead center of the bullseye. "Goddamnedest shooting I ever saw," "Boy, if you were white I'd send you to the sharpshooters," O'Kelly said after he saw the grouping of the shots and the targets. If you were white. Those words had always haunted Absalom like a ghostly figure lurking in the dark shadows of his life. If he was white, Absalom knew he would have been able to go to a much better school as a child, and when he finished his formal schooling, if he was white, Absalom knew he could have gotten one of those good jobs in a factory, and if he was white he would have a better life back in the States. If he was white when he joined the Army, he would have been in a combat unit rather than being assigned to driving a supply truck as he was doing. Even after putting in 3 requests to be transferred to a colored rifle company, all he got for his efforts was being assigned as a truck driver supplying ammunition to those frontline units, and up until now the closest he ever came to combat since D-Day was when that lone Bf-109 made a few passing runs on the convoy Absalom was driving in 2 days after D-Day. The sound of a bullet bouncing off the T-48 grabbed Absalom's attention, and he saw a soldier go down a few feet from him. As the wounded man tried to crawl to cover, Absalom heard a distinct second single shot ringing out, striking its mark again, causing a small pool of blood to quickly surround the body of the dying man, and as the body of the man twitched as it grasped to hold on to what life was left in it, a third bullet struck the dying body. The flicker of sunlight that reflected off the front glass of the sniper's rifle scope caused Absalom's eyes to follow the reflected ray of sunlight back to the second-story window of the farmhouse. Now Absalom understood why the bodies of James and the kid that he dragged to cover behind the tank weren't hit by bullets fired from the machine gun. They were shot by the hidden sniper, who was in the upper second-story right room of the farmhouse that faced the bridge, giving the hidden sniper the perfect advantage to freely pick off his victims as he had been doing. Absalom figured that in his gluttony of choices the German sniper didn't see him in person as a real threat, and rather than giving his position away by shooting at them, he would leave them to be cut down by the crossfire of those 2 machine gun emplacements. Absalom knew that if any of the other GIs trying to make their way along the right side of the bridge wouldn't have a chance getting any further than he in person, as the German sniper was waiting to pick them off as he had done James, the kid, and the others who were working their way along the right side of the bridge. Now it would be up to Absalom to take care of that hidden sniper should he get a chance to. And that was all he had, was just one chance, but that was all he needed or would have. But if he missed him, his quarry would either move, or worse, Absalom would then become the sniper's quarry, who could pick him off from his well-hidden place. After checking his M1 again, Absalom took in a long slow breath and made himself ready. Closing his eyes, he took another moment to see the sniper. Yes, there he was, standing just in the shadows on the right side of the window so not to be seen. "See the scope?" his grandfather softly said as his bony finger touched Absalom just above the right eye. As if standing up from his seat to leave the room, Absalom stood, opened his eyes, and with a cool and steady calm he aimed the M1 at the upper right side of the window of the farmhouse as he squeezed off the full clip before ducking back behind the cover of the T-48. Klaus Goldberg had taken up his sniper's position in the second-story bedroom that faced toward the village of Armior, giving him the advantage of picking off any American soldiers who would have made it along the right side of the bridge past the disabled anti-tank vehicle. Through his scope, Klaus had seen the unusual dark-skinned American soldier, as he along with the other soldier with the large automatic rifle made their way across the bridge. But the 2 were using the disabled vehicles and the 4-foot-high bridge wall for cover as they advanced along the left side of the bridge, which at the time neither of them offered Klaus a clear target that would allow him to stop them without giving his position away, and by ignoring them at the time in order to get the other 2 American soldiers who were much easier targets as they had moved along the right side of the bridge, and now cost the German sniper his life as he was totally surprised by the dark-skinned American suddenly popping up from behind the anti-tank vehicle, and before Klaus could react to the sudden appearance of the dark-skinned soldier, he had aimed his rifle at the upper window and fired off several rounds with deadly accuracy. The first bullet fired from the dark-skinned American soldier's rifle ripped through Klaus' skull as the next 3 shots hit the body of the second soldier in the room, causing the young German to drop to the floor while still clutching the MP-40. The familiar pinging sound of the empty clip ejecting itself from the rifle signaled to Absalom that he was out of ammo, that had him calmly slipping back behind the T-48 as if playing a game of hide-and-seek with the hidden sniper. "God damn it, boy, where did you learn to shoot like that?" Grayson said as he crouched next to Absalom, as they both were now safely behind the cover of the disabled T-48. Grayson's question was responded to by a smile that was now on Absalom's small thick lips as he looked into the face of an astonished Grayson, who along with two other soldiers had made their way to the cover of the disabled T-48. Reaching for his fifth clip from the M1 ammo belt, Absalom quickly inserted the fresh clip into the rifle's ammo chamber. "Sorry, but I got to run," a smiling Absalom told Grayson, and checking the Thompson, and after he secured the M1 over his left shoulder, peeked from around the front of the T-48. After taking the Thompson off safety, he took a firm hold of the weapon, and leaving the cover of the T-48 he fired two short blasts from the Thompson that was aided with the suppressive fire from Person's Browning automatic rifle, giving Absalom the time he needed to sprint over to the half-track that was a few dozen feet away from the safety of the T-48. "Leader of peace," Person said with a smile as he and Absalom crouched behind the half-track. "Huh? I guess those Germans you killed are at peace now." The sound of the machine gun on the left broke their brief moment of repose. "No rest for the weary," Person said as he set himself to move. "God damn it," he yelled as a ricocheting bullet nicked the right side of his helmet as the machine gun on the right side of the bridge was firing at their position. "Where are those assholes, Puclicli and Valdez?" Person snapped as he looked down at the other end of the bridge and saw that most of their squad were being pinned down by the relentless fire of the two machine guns that had already cut down a few new victims who hadn't been so lucky as he and Absalom in their attempt to make their way toward the west end of the bridge. "If we don't do something quick, those jokers are going to pull back and leave us hanging here," he said and motioned to Grayson to fire at the machine gun to the right. "Put some fire on that goddamn gun," he yelled, "you dumbass country." His words were drowned out by a stick grenade that went off several feet from them, and a blast of it was absorbed by the other side of the half-track. "They were trying to flush us out," Person said over the sound of a second stick grenade exploding. "Got any ideas?" he asked, pressing himself hard against the half-track like a child would do with his mother as he was seeking for protection from the half-track against the stick grenades. "Briefly stated, ma'am, the three laws are 1. An object in motion will remain in motion unless acted upon by a net force. 2. Force mass multiplied by acceleration. And 3. To every action there is an equal and opposite reaction," Absalom said as he stood by his desk. The young boy of 12 was dressed in a freshly washed white shirt that had been starched and ironed, a pair of retailored pressed dress pants that were once his father's, and a pair of old black dress shoes that had a fresh spit shine on them. "Very good, Absalom, you may sit down," Mrs. Walker said, looking at him, but not even the rigid drill sergeant expression she wore could mask the gleam of delight in those light brown eyes of hers, telling Absalom that she was very pleased with him, and not just for giving her the correct answer, but that, like so many times before when she called on him, he knew the correct answer from memory and was able to recite it without making a mistake when doing so. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, sitting back down in his desk as he tried to keep the smile back that was tugging at the corners of his small mouth. Mrs. Estelle Alice Walker had been Absalom's school teacher from the first grade as well as his second mother, and it seemed to him that she was much harder on him than any of her other students, or even as his parents was, especially when it came to learning his class lessons. Just because white folks won't let you be nothing more than common laborers, housekeepers, and field hands when working for them don't mean you have to be ignorant ones. Mrs. Walker had often told her class, and Absalom had heard that saying so much from his parents as well, that it had become the 12th commandment for him. "Ladies, what we have here is the Mark II-A1 hand grenade with about a 4-second fuse," O'Kelly said as he held up the grenade with his left hand for the group of soldiers to see. "And boy, let me tell you one thing for sure, you ain't wanting to be anywhere around when one of these babies go off, 'cause if you are," O'Kelly's smile blossomed into a bright grin, "there ain't gonna be much of you found to put in a shoebox to ship home. It is a killing range of about 20 feet, so you better be ready to run faster than that old boy Jesse Owens for cover after you toss this baby," O'Kelly's voice warned. Then he pulled the pin and tossed the grenade at the target in the open field and ordered everyone in the group to duck behind the protective wall. Absalom had never heard anything so loud in his life, and when he looked at the target all he saw was remnants of what was left of it. Since D-Day he'd seen just what a grenade could do to human flesh as well as a flamethrower, but seeing a once-living human being torn apart by an explosion wasn't as bad as the smell of a burning body or decomposing flesh of any kind. Looking ahead he saw to his right just over the horizon of the bridge the stack of sandbags, and just behind the piled up 4 high sacks he could see the top of a German soldier's helmet. He figured it was where the emplacement of one of the machine gun nests that was laying down that murderous crossfire, and that the other machine gun had to be set up in about or near the same location on the left side of the bridge. Taking one of the 6 grenades from the carrier he pulled the grenade's ring that released the safety pin and, as if throwing a baseball, arched it up over the half-track to the left in the direction of the unseen machine gun nest. The lazy toss of the grenade would make it easy for any of the German soldiers of the emplacement to catch it and toss it back to him, that is if they saw it in time. Taking a second grenade from the carrier he arched it in the same manner toward the pile of sandbags to his right. Shortly after he had tossed the first one he heard the Germans yelling something that was shortly followed by an explosion as the first grenade went off. Then quickly stepping from behind the cover of the half-track he cut loose with the rest of the clip of the Thompson. After the second grenade that he had tossed at the nest to his right went off Absalom quickly moved up along the wall of the bridge, ejecting the empty ammo clip of the Thompson as he went and slipped in a fresh one and fired at the machine gun nest to the right before the gunners had a chance to recover from the grenade that exploded near them. Moving along the left wall of the bridge toward the pile of sandbags at the far end of the bridge that would give him cover from the Germans ahead. As he quickly moved toward his new position Absalom heard automatic fire, but he didn't stop to see who was shooting, or from which end of the bridge it was coming from. All he knew was that he had to reach the stack of sandbags that were about 20 feet in front of him, and with the Germans shooting at him the pile of sandbags seemed a lot further, and having to run in a crouching position he felt as if he was moving slower than his grandfather did when he walked. Just before he reached the sandbags he saw a German soldier who had positioned himself behind them, reloading his 98K rifle to catch an unsuspecting Absalom. Aiming the Thompson, the fast-moving Absalom fired, but the clip was empty. He stopped and quickly ejected the empty from the Thompson, reached for another clip from his vest, slapped it in and shot. As the bullets flew from the muzzle of the Thompson they cut down the German soldier, and with a second blast from the death-spitting Thompson the bullets ripped into the body of the second German soldier who had been hiding behind the sandbags as well. On safely reaching the pile of sandbags Absalom saw that they afforded him cover from the machine gun to his left and gave him a clear view of the machine gun nest on the right that was now a pile of twisted metal that was covered with human blood, pieces of uniform and small bits of body parts. "What the hell is that crazy-ass nigger doing?" McPherson heard someone saying as they watched Absalom move from the cover of the half-track as the first grenade that he tossed exploded a few feet above the Germans manning the machine gun. As McPherson watched the young driver moving along the wall of the bridge that gave him cover from the entrenched Germans along the river's edge, the second grenade that Absalom had tossed bounced off one of the top front sandbags of the machine gun nest. Then a fraction of a second later it exploded, violently ejecting the 2 Germans from their hiding place. It was then that person popped out from behind the protection of the half-track, providing cover fire for the young driver as he was crouching while moving along the wall of the bridge, firing the Thompson in the direction of the machine gun nest to his left before turning his fire on the one to his right. On seeing the 2 Germans moving to the once occupied machine gun nest waiting for the unaware Absalom to get closer to them, McPherson felt a momentary sadness for the young G as he was nearing the stack of sandbags, and it was then that McPherson heard himself calling out to the unsuspecting Absalom of the danger and to move out of the line of fire. But to the battle-hardened sergeant's surprise he and the others watched in amazement as Absalom stopped his advancement toward the sandbags, then coolly and quickly reloaded his weapon and fired at the 2 Germans, who crumpled lifelessly before the fire of Absalom's Thompson. A crooked smile of gleam lit the rough face of McPherson. "That son of a bitch," he mumbled when Absalom reached the edge of the bridge and watched as the cool-headed GI once again reload the Thompson with a fresh clip. "All right, ladies, let's go and don't bunch up," McPherson shouted to the men with him. "Damn crazy-ass kid." A now smiling McPherson mumbled as he and a group of soldiers quickly moved to the T-48 where Grayson was. "God damn it, Grayson. Put some fire on that machine gun in that upper window now," McPherson ordered, pointing to the location of the machine gun. "Now damn it." The stunned soldier came out of his daze and aimed his M1 at the upper window as he, along with the soldier with a Browning automatic rifle, and one with a grease gun, fired at the machine gun gunner in the upper left window of the farmhouse. When Oberst Lieutenant Engels heard that one of his best snipers, who had been placed in the upstairs right bedroom of the farmhouse facing the bridge, had been killed, he was impressed that the Americans had a sniper with the skill to hit his target from such a distance. But when he learned that it was one of the two American soldiers who had gotten past the disabled anti-tank vehicle on the bridge, and there was at least one American who had moved near enough to the edge of his defenses, but at the time Oberst Lieutenant Engels knew that this lone soldier was no threat of getting past the crossfire of the two machine gun emplacements near the bridge, and it was the news of both machine gun nests being knocked out that brought the German officer to the upper bedroom, and as he walked into the room he saw the walls of the room stained with the splattered blood of Oberst Goldberg and the second dead soldier, who was clutching his MP-40. Telling Oberst Lieutenant Engels that it was now only a matter of time before the Americans would breach his once impenetrable defenses, and if he didn't call up the rest of his men to hold off the assault, he wouldn't be able to hold the farmhouse, not even with the one tank he had, which had a bad tread wheel and was of little use to him should the Americans break through and have one of their bazooka team with them. "There, sir," the young officer said, who was standing behind Engels, pointing to the stack of sandbags just at the left edge of the bridge. As Oberst Lieutenant Engels looked through the field glasses, to his surprise he saw just the side of the face of the lone advancing American soldier, a young Negro crouching behind the sandbags where the once emplacement was. "Perhaps the Americans has called for Jesse Owens to help them cross the bridge," Unteroffizier Wolf said, smiling as he looked at the man crouching behind the sandbags as machine gun fire from the emplacement in the room on the other side of the hallway held the lone soldier pinned down. Oberst Lieutenant Engels smiled at Wolf's remark. Engels remembered seeing the Black at the Summer Games back in Berlin and was very impressed with the speed and athletic ability of the man, and although the remark Unteroffizier Wolf had just made was somewhat humorous, Engels knew that it wasn't true, as he well knew of the Americans' feeling toward the blacks of their country, and although Jesse Owens' speed and athleticism was used to show the Führer that his concept of a German master race wasn't true, they would never allow blacks to fight with whites. Still, Oberst Lieutenant Engels was impressed by this Negro. Not only had this young soldier gotten past the crossfire, but it was the deadly accuracy of this young soldier with that rifle that now had Engels concerned. Looking at the face of this young Negro, Engels also saw no sign of fear, which was even more dangerous than a well-trained company of Fallschirmjägers. "Unteroffizier Wolf," Engels began to say as he raised the field glasses up to his face again to look through them, and as he did so the sunlight reflected off the left front lens of his field glasses. "So that's how you did it, you used the reflection of the sunlight off the scope," Engels thought, smiling. "Clever lad, very clever." The last thing Engels saw as he looked through his field glasses was the muzzle flash of the M1 rifle of the lone advancing American soldier. As he fell backwards from the impact of the bullet that shattered the left lens of the field glasses, 3 more bullets ripped through the upper right window of the room, one skipping off the left side of Oberst Lieutenant Engels' head before striking the neck of the young officer who stood just behind and right of his commanding officer. Instantly the young officer clutched at his throat with both of his hands in a vain attempt to try and keep his blood from escaping the wound. As he fell to the floor, 5 more bullets ripped through the window, and 3 of them found a new home in the broad chest of Unteroffizier Wolf, who was dead before his lifeless body fell to the floor. The deadly marksmanship of the American soldier caused the group of conscripts to quickly flee out of the room before any more bullets from his rifle found them as well. The suppressive fire provided by the soldiers on the machine gun set up in the second-story left window of the farmhouse allowed Absalom the time he needed to fire at the scope lens of the sniper that he thought he got the first time, and instead of firing 4 shots, Absalom used the entire clip of his M1 as he sprayed the window by moving his aim slightly from left to right with each shot fired. When he heard the clip eject itself, he crouched behind the sandbags and quickly reloaded his M1 and made ready to move. Don't waste your shots, remember all you need is one good one to take down your target, his grandfather's voice said. So see it here and here, he added as he touched Absalom on the head again, then pointed to the young boy's right eye. I think you got him that time, a breathless person said as he crouched next to Absalom behind the pile of sandbags. He had also seen the sniper as well, but with a Browning automatic rifle his shooting at him would have been a waste of ammo. What are you ladies doing, holding each other's hands? McPherson yelled as he knelt on one knee near the half-track. Clear those damn trenches out. Person looked at the now stern-faced McPherson for a moment, then gave him a sharp, crisp salute. Ready? Person said to Absalom, who had shouldered his M1 and reached for the Thompson. Yeah, came the half-weary reply from a smiling Absalom. Where did you learn the trick with the hand grenade? Person asked as he checked the magazine of the Browning automatic rifle. In school, Absalom said with a bright smile. Well, that must have been some school you went to, Person added as he shoved a fresh clip into the Browning automatic rifle after he had tapped the fresh clip against his helmet twice. Think you can do it again? I can try, Absalom said, smiling. So how many you got left? Person asked, studying the smiling face of Absalom. Just these 2, came Absalom's reply after checking the grenade carrier. Well, take one of mine, Person said, holding out a grenade to him. Okay, try it on the right flank cause that's where we're going next. Ready? Absalom nodded. Person watched as the grenade was arched into the air and then heard an explosion as smoke, pieces of metal, and the screams of Germans filled the air. The second grenade that Absalom tossed toward the trench exploded and sent up a large cloud of dirt mixed with blood and parts of German soldiers into the air. Whether they were alive when it exploded, it didn't matter, as he and Person fired shots into the bodies lying in the trench as they ran toward it. Their new position gave Absalom and Person perfect cover from the German troops who occupied the farmyard and those that were near the barn, where the turret gun of the Panzer could be seen. But to their surprise, the tank didn't move toward them as it fired another round at them that hit several yards from the trench. I don't think its tracks are working, Absalom said as he fired off a short blast from the Thompson at several German soldiers who came rushing at them from the front side of the farmhouse. The short rapid fire from the Thompson took out 3 of them, and as Person fired the Browning automatic rifle caused the remaining Germans to retrace their steps that had them quickly taking cover behind the short wood pile. By then Sergeant McPherson and the rest of the squad had taken cover in the trench on the left and was giving supporting fire, catching the German soldiers in a crossfire that made a vain attempt to rush Absalom in Person position again. With his last grenade, Absalom arched it toward the wood pile that exploded just above it, ripping it apart, killing the last 2 German soldiers hiding behind it, as their bodies were riddled with metal fragments from the exploding grenade and large chunks of wood. One of these days you're going to have to show me how you do that, Person said, slapping a fresh clip into the Browning automatic rifle. Okay, let's go knock on the front door, Person said with a smile. As they were about to exit the trench, an exploding shell from the Panzer hit the ground several yards away, knocking them both backwards into the trench with such force that Absalom was dazed by the impact of the concussion of the exploding shell. As he tried to steady himself, he looked over at Person, who was mouthing something to him, but the loud ringing in Absalom's ears made it impossible for him to hear what Person was saying. Move faster, Absalom told himself, got to move faster. But his body wasn't responding to his verbal thoughts. If the German soldiers made another assault on them, he knew that in his current state, he wouldn't be able to put up much of a fight. God damn it, boy. Look at me when I'm talking to you, the elderly man said, frowning at Absalom, whose face had gone from its normal brownish glow to an ashy tint as he felt a tight knot in his stomach squeezing the air out of him. You catch the damn chicken by the neck like this and... Absalom never heard the rest of what Sergeant Dustin was saying, as what was left of Absalom's breakfast of eggs, toast, half-cooked oatmeal and coffee came spewing out of his mouth and onto the left pant leg of Mess Sergeant Dustin's uniform and the man's freshly shined boots. Sweet Jesus, boy! What kind of goddamn soldier are you? Sergeant Dustin snapped, looking at Absalom, who was now double over as he cradled his midsection, his body convulsing as the knot in his stomach became tighter. Them damn Nazis German ain't going to have no trouble out of you, are they, boy? A soldier added with a smile as he watched Absalom throwing up. Get the son of a bitch out of here. Sergeant Dustin snapped. Are you okay? Sam asked Absalom, who nodded his head as he tried to stand back up only to double back over again. Absalom never knew what it was about seeing an animal killed that made him react in such a way, but it always did. As much as he liked meat, the process that it took to get it never did sit well with his stomach, which left a nagging question in the back of his mind as to what he would do if he had been transferred to a front-line colored company. It might have been easy to kill a defenseless animal, but killing a man was different, especially one with a weapon, and since he couldn't stand killing a simple mindless chicken, just what would he do when it came to killing a man? But now he had the answer to that question, as so far he hadn't given his action today a second thought, not since he had started across the bridge with Person, nor had he reacted to seeing death today as he had done the first time he saw that dead German on his first run up from the beachhead. Are you okay? Absalom heard Person saying that, had him looking into the soldier's face that had a light layer of dust that was mixed with the blood that came from Person's nose and the right corner of his mouth. Absalom nodded, then looked around for his helmet. I hate those damn things, Person said as the Panzer fired off another round that exploded several yards left of the trench where Person and Absalom were. Absalom figured that the Panzer firing that last round was more of a warning shot, just to let them know that the fight wasn't over with just yet. Damn tanks are worse than a chaperone, Person added with a smile as he took a quick look to see where the tank was at. So Absalom, do you have a girl back at home? Person asked, reaching for his weapon. No, Absalom said as he picked up his helmet and put it back on his head, only this time he made sure to fasten the chin strap, pulling it tighter to make sure that his helmet didn't come off again, not unless it took his head with it the next time. You're a smart boy. Me, I got 3 of them back in the States, plus a wife, Person said as a smile flashed across his face. Got a few girlfriends back in England too, but I don't know what I'm going to do if I get out of this. Well, you could always become a Mormon, Absalom told him, reaching for the Thompson machine gun. Yeah, Person said, looking at him, and saw a look of sincerity on the young man's face. Sure, the men there have 2 or 3 wives, Absalom said as he picked up his M1 and checked it. Of course you'll have to move to Utah. Utah? Well, that ain't so bad. I suppose anything is better than Detroit, 'cause a guy can freeze his damn tail off in the winter there and nearly cook to death in the summer, Person said, smiling. I'm sure that can be said of a lot of places up north, Absalom said, taking off the M1 ammo belt after he saw the damage to his rifle. So how come you know so much? Person asked. Mrs. Walker, Absalom said, smiling. Mrs. Walker? Person said with a puzzled look when he saw Absalom smiling. Yeah, she was my school teacher up until I finish, Absalom told him. High school? Person said, reaching for his pack of smokes, then with a light flick of his wrist caused several cigarettes to pop up from the half-empty pack and held it out to Absalom. No thanks, I don't smoke, Absalom said. Yeah, she had me reading every book she had, and when I finished them she would get more books from the White Library in Santa Fe. Now the library back in Weston's Freedom Town has just as many books as the one in Santa Fe, if not more, Absalom said as he scanned the farmhouse yard to see if there were German soldiers lurking about. Yeah, well, I still can't get over you living out there. Most Negroes that I know back in Detroit are from the South. So how did your people end up in Weston's Freedom Town? Person said. My grandfather was in the Army, and after the war he stayed in and was sent out west, Absalom replied. You mean he was one of those Buffalo Soldier fellows? Person said, unable to hide the surprise in his voice. Yeah, after leaving the army he got himself some government land, married my grandmother, and ever since we Scots have been living there. So are there many of you out there? I mean in the town. There's about 200 families. And you don't have trouble with white people out there? Well, most of the whites who live in Santa Fe or Albuquerque don't come around much, and the only time we ever see any white people is when they pass through Weston's Freedom Town on their way to California, or when a group of us go to Santa Fe about once a month to pick up things that we need, but other than that we keep pretty much to ourselves. What about the Mexicans and the Indians? Person's question produced a smile on Absalom's face. It had never ceased to amaze Absalom when he saw that look that Person now had on his face, as it was the same one he got from both coloreds and white folks when they learn of the protective state that he grew up in. It was a well-known fact to anyone living within 100 miles of Weston's Freedom Town not to go meddling with the people living there, that's unless they like messing with a hornet's nest, which was what they would be doing. After having to fight off Mexican bandits and mescalero Apaches that had raided in that area, then having to stay off greedy white landowners who had tried to steal their land, the fledgling settlement of ex-soldiers, southern sharecroppers, and northern blacks was able to take root as it soon grew into a thriving small community. But because of the shortage of colored women in the settlement at the time, some of the men traded with the more friendly neighboring Indian tribe for wives, and still some of the colored men married Mexican women. By the time Absalom was born, the settlement was a thriving town with shops, stores, a sizable law force and volunteer fire station, a schoolhouse, a church, 2 banks, a number of thriving businesses, that were all supported by a population that was made up of some 200-plus families and a large number of single folks. And the last time the people of Weston's Freedom Town had any serious trouble with any white people was 2 years before he was born, when a group of white men came to the town on a 4th of July to try and curtail the town's celebration of it. From what Absalom was told of the story, the unwanted guest was all escorted out of town by the peace committee members of Henry, Winchester, Smith and Wesson, Colt, and Springfield, making it the last time any white people came to Weston's Freedom Town looking for trouble. Still, even growing up in such a cocoon, Absalom and the other children there weren't left in a state of ignorance concerning life outside of his hometown, or the ill treatment of colored people by white folks out in the world, a sobering fact that Absalom had been well reminded from the first day that he left for a boot camp. Of course, it wasn't as bad in England or France as it was back in the States. Still, he had been reminded that he was colored by the whites from America. As far as the white people of Europe were concerned, he was an American liberator, even though he drove a truck, and it was in Paris that he had his first real contact with a white woman, and that in itself was very surprising and unsettling for him by Annette's genuine friendliness toward him. Of course, when he got back to the barracks that night, he didn't have a story to tell like most of the guys from his unit did, as they bragged about what they had done with a French or Belgian girl that they were with. Absalom well knew that if any of the white soldiers had heard of those boastful coloreds talking about being with any white woman, even if they were a common streetwalker, they might end up like Tommy Hormus, or worse. But it wasn't for that reason only that Absalom shied away from Annette or any other European woman that had an eye for him. The night before Absalom left for a boot camp, he and his father had a long talk that was much different than any that they had, as his father warned him about getting himself into any kind of trouble, which included staying away from the lips of a strange woman, especially white women. When this is all over with, then maybe you can come back here if you want, find a nice girl, get married, and raise a family. Absalom's father had told him while flashing him that big smile of his. That is, if she'll come back here with you to live. At first, Absalom hadn't really given much thought about what his father said of him coming back to Weston's Freedom Town and starting a family of his own. He was thinking that after the war he might want to see more of the world, see how other colored people live. However, since leaving home he had his fill of the world and had seen enough to know that after all this was over with, he would be getting himself back home once he got out of the army, and not just to get away from these ill-tempered white folks either. He was more than ready to get back to the one place he could have peace, real peace. And if he never left Weston's Freedom Town for the rest of his life, it would be okay with him too. Even though he found the Europeans not as bad as those white folks back in the States, he felt that once the war ended they might lose this cloak of humility that had a way of humbling the most racist white person. He recalled some of the stories his grandfather told him about his experience in the Civil War, and how the white people of the southern towns that they passed through hated being lorded over by any colored soldiers, especially the Confederate prisoners of war. And even in the Great War his father told him how the colored soldiers were treated by the white soldiers, and even by some of the Ally soldiers. Now when the fighting started, the only color that mattered was the color of a man's uniform, that and not getting shot. After the Great War was over, a lot of the colored soldiers stayed in Europe when they were discharged from the army, and Absalom had met a few of them who lived in England, as well as the families of those Negro soldiers who were living on the continent before the war broke out. Of all the ones he met, none of them seemed very happy living in Europe. Like the colored folks back in America, those ex-soldiers and their children had to deal with the same type of prejudice from the Europeans, who looked upon him as something less than a foreigner. And should he survive this war, Absalom knew that he would be heading straight back to Weston's Freedom Town, and gladly. Even as a truck driver, getting through this war wasn't a sure thing, and life behind the battle line was just as dangerous, if not more so, than being on the front. He was never so glad now that he wasn't with the 93rd or the 92nd that were fighting in the Pacific and in Italy, cause he sure couldn't see himself having to deal with fighting at two front-line duty on a daily basis. Even those few strafing runs from the Luftwaffe he had experienced were more tolerable than having to deal with living in this white man's army and fighting the Axis powers too. And as far as him finding a wife, he hadn't given that much thought either, as the girls that he grew up with in Weston's Freedom Town were more like sisters to him, making it very hard to look at them in any other way. So would you like me to write you? I mean, it really wouldn't be any trouble for me to. Just to let you know about any new books we get in the library and what books we'll be reading in the Wednesday night reading circle. Just to keep you up to date, not that you'll be doing that much reading over there. The young woman standing behind the librarian's desk said, handing Absalom the books he'd checked out to read, and seeing the way he was looking back at her, a relaxing girlish smile lit her face. Sarah May Worker was a blossoming 20-year-old, young-looking, tall, slender-built, almond brown-skinned woman with thick coal-black, natural wavy shoulder-length hair that she often wore in a pulled-back bun style, an oval-shaped face, natural angle eyebrows, large brown eyes, medium-sized nose, nice full small lips, and had a womanly figure that couldn't be hidden. She was Mrs. Worker's niece, who had come from Los Angeles to work in Weston's Freedom Town's library, and from the moment of her arrival she had caused quite a stir. Her fashionable dress and big city ways had helped to spark an interest to bring Weston's Freedom Town into the 20th century, which she and several of the returning young people who had gone off to college had sought to do. The young Miss Sarah Walker had also sparked the interests of several of the young men as well, especially Absalom. But unlike most of the boys he grew up with, Absalom had always been very timid and shy around girls, even around the ones he had grown up with, as he was never drawn to girls the way most boys his age were, nor did he ever have a special girl. Not that any of the girls in Weston's Freedom Town weren't appealing to him, as a large majority of them were, and more than half a dozen who were exceptionally attractive, and of those several had shown a strong interest in him, but none of them had ever sparked his interest. Not even Mary Kay Reed, who was one of the prettiest fair-skinned girls in Weston's Freedom Town, and was said of her grandmother being once a white captive of the Apaches. Old Absalom sure spending a lot of time down at the library now since that young pretty city gal came to work there. The boy must have read half the books in the library by now. His uncle Justinian had jokingly said a few times. "Only if you have time to," Absalom told Sarah. Of course he hadn't expected to get as many letters from her as he had after leaving home, and he was very surprised at the first mail call of his basic training to get a letter from her, and since then Sarah hadn't failed to send him at least 2 letters every week, sometimes 3 letters being dated a few days apart. Even though he wasn't much of a letter writer, Absalom did write her back often, and prior to headquarters placing a communication blackout so the Axis power wouldn't learn anything about the invasion, and knowing that any letters that he wrote home would be censored by the ever-watchful eyes of the army, he didn't express what was in his heart as how much he missed seeing her. Over the weeks leading up to the invasion and after the landing, he hadn't the time to write her on a regular basis, and now with the push to the Rhine, the Red Ball Express was so busy that what time Absalom did have between his supply runs he spent trying to catch up on his sleep, and after a hot shower and getting a hot meal he would often fall off to sleep while writing to her. In his inner pocket was a 3-page letter he had written her, and it was as he was on his way to the company mailbox to drop it off that Sergeant Williams had stopped him and voluntarily ordered him to make a supply run here to Armior. "I know that you probably don't have time to write with the war going on, so don't worry about it, as long as you are safe, and will write me when you can. Love you always, Sarah." She had ended the letter he got from her a few days before D-Day, and a smile lit Absalom's face as he now thought about how surprised he was to see that she had ended the letter with that sentiment. That was the first time that she had ended any of her letters that way, and it had him puzzled for some time as to why she had done so and whether it meant anything more than her just saying it, like the way his mother ended her letters. "Always love you, my son, Mother." But last week during mail call, when he got several letters from home, 5 of them being from Sarah, and it was then he soon got his answer, and as he read her letters in the order of their dates, each one ended with, "Love you always, Sarah." However, it wasn't until her 4th letter that Absalom fully understood as to why she had ended each of her letters, "Love you always, Sarah." And as he read the 5-page letter that had a picture of her at the Weston's Freedom Town 4th of July gathering pinned to the last page. For a long time he had studied her picture, and as he looked at her smiling face it made him wish that he had waited to be drafted rather than volunteering. Sarah was wearing that dress he liked seeing on her so much, a V-neckline 2-button dress that crossed in front at the waistline, giving a very good look at just how shapely a woman Sarah was. Of course, with her wearing that dress to the celebration, she had every man back in Weston's Freedom Town attention, especially Charlie Fisher. "I really miss talking with you and seeing you at the book club meetings, which aren't as enjoyable without you being here. Everyone here is always talking about the war in Europe and in the Pacific, and we see the newsreel of the hard fighting that's going on over there as well, and I keep you in my prayers each day and night, asking God to keep you safe and bring you back to me here in Weston's Freedom Town. Even though I know that you're not in the front line fighting like those colored units that are in the Pacific and Italy, I still worry for your safety. So far we've only had a few families here to receive telegrams from the War Department, and each time one of the Western Union men from Santa Fe comes here my heart all but stops, as I hope that it's not for your parents. Last night I went to see your mother and we sat talking for some time. She was telling me about when you were." It was the longest letter that he had gotten from her, and unlike any one of the guys of his company, whenever they got a picture of their girls or wives, Absalom didn't bother sharing the picture of Sarah that he had sent him, and it was only when he was alone or just before he was about to go to sleep that he would pull it out and look at it. Since getting her picture, it had become the only piece of Weston's Freedom Town he had to look at, and one he could do for hours without even growing tired of. He smiled. Maybe that was the reason he didn't date any of the girls here, and not just because they were white, or what the white soldiers would do to him if they found out he was. Reaching inside his jacket pocket, he pulled out Sarah's picture and looked at her smiling face. "I love you too, Sarah," he said softly to himself, then put her picture back in his inner jacket pocket. Yes, he had a girl back home, only he didn't know it until now. Even though he liked her from the moment he saw her, it had taken this crazy war that now separated him from her to make him realize it, and if it hadn't been for this war he could be back home with Sarah rather than just having this picture of her to look at. "What are you ladies doing, taking a tea break?" McPherson said as he crouched down next to Absalom. "Yeah, did you bring any to drink?" Person said, shooting his sergeant a look only to smile at him a short second later. "No. Why do you want one?" McPherson said as a shell exploded near the edge of the bridge. "If so, we can have one when we get back to Armior. I'll buy the first round." "Well, there's a water well over there." Absalom said, and got an odd look from both men. "Well, I don't drink, not spirits, that is," Absalom added with a noticeable blush on his now dust-covered face. "Well then, poor boy, you can have a nice cold glass of milk," McPherson said with a quick smile, "but first we've got to knock out that Panzer." "No problem," Absalom said, checking the Thompson. "Person, you, Absalom, and Valdez, work your way around the side of the house and flank that rat's nest, and I'll get a bazooka team in position to hit the Panzer," McPherson said, looking at the three men. "And just how do we do that? Sing them a song?" Person asked. "You and the boy wonder here will come up with something, just like the two of you have done so far," McPherson said, smiling at Absalom. "Damn what I wouldn't give to have you in my squad," McPherson added, looking at the smiling Absalom. "Now get going and I'll meet you at the well when this is over with," McPherson said, then turned and with a series of hand motion ordered the men who were moving across the bridge to take up position in the trenches. Now that they had taken the bridge, he wasn't about to lose it, as they had paid a high toll in human life just to cross it, and he wasn't about to relinquish it back to the Germans. And once they took out that Panzer and cleared out the rest of the German troops, McPherson was going to hold the farm like it was his until the rest of the division moved into Armior. "Pew Clicky and Grayson, run yourselves back and grab me that tank killer on the bridge, and make sure you get the ammo too," he said, looking at the two men, who were staring back at him in disbelief. "That wasn't a request, ladies. Now get your asses moving," McPherson ordered. Then he looked to see where Person, Absalom, and Valdez were. "We better clear out the house first," Valdez suggested as the three men were about to make their run for the cover of the destroyed car near the front of the farmhouse. "So why don't you go knock on the front door," Person said, "just to see if anybody is at home." "Very funny, smartass," Valdez said, giving Person a stern look as he gripped his M1. "He's right, there could be more snipers on the second floor," Absalom added. "Well, I don't want to get shot by any of those trigger-happy snipers of ours from across the river either," Person added. "So we'll stay out of the rooms facing the river," Valdez told them. "Right," Person said. "Okay, let's go, and don't block each other line of fire. And Absalom, since you're the crack shot, you have the lead. How many grenades do you have?" Person asked. "I'm all out," Absalom replied, showing Person the empty grenade carrier. "Valdez, how many grenades you got?" Person asked him. "3," came Valdez's reply. "Well, give them to the peacegiver," Person said with a smile. "Okay, let's go, and don't bunch up," Person reminded them again. "Ready?" The other two nodded, and then the three quickly moved from the cover of the car to the front porch, keeping clear of the windows. "Okay, let's go," Person said in a low voice as he made ready to kick the door in. "Wait, I thought we were going to knock," Valdez said, and got a cutting look from Person. "Just watch my back, smartass," Person said, lifting his right foot. Whether it was because of the boldness of the three or the fact that they had never seen a Negro before, as Absalom was the first of the three to come through the door, the sudden appearance of the three men who had burst into the front room of the farmhouse caused the group of surprised Germans to be frozen in time as they stared at the three American soldiers with looks of bewilderment. And it was in that moment of hesitation that gave the three intruders an edge as they sprayed the room with bullets as they quickly backed out of the house and onto the porch. When they were back on the front porch, Absalom quickly tossed one of the grenades he had through the front room window to finish off any of the German soldiers that might be still alive in the room. "Well, that's what I call a knock," Person said, smiling, looking in the room via the front window only to see the bodies of the dead Germans. "Okay, let's check out the rest of the house and watch your line of fire," Person told them. After checking their weapons, the three men made ready to re-enter the farmhouse, with Absalom leading. Looking into the front room, Absalom had to force his eyes to scan the room so not to look at the pale, lifeless bodies of the young Germans lying on the floor of the front room. "Absalom, check upstairs. Valdez, you check the cellar," Person said as the three men stood in the room. "And Absalom, watch yourself. These German bastards hide everywhere," Person warned Absalom, who was standing at the bottom of the stairs, and gave Person a quick nod after receiving the words of warning. With his back firmly pressed against the wall and a firm grip on the Thompson that was now aimed upward, Absalom started up the stairs slowly and quietly to the second floor of the farmhouse. The sound of his pounding heart now drowned out all sounds of the battle that was still going on outside. As the second floor of the house slowly came into sight, and with cat-like senses Absalom watched for any movement, listening for the slightest sound that came from any of the rooms on the second floor of the house as he fixed himself to play this very deadly game of hide-and-seek, a game that as a child he wasn't very good at. For a brief instant he froze as he thought he caught the shadowy glimpse of a figure that had moved in the first room at the top of the stairs. He froze long enough to listen for a clue to verify his suspicion before continuing. Even with the noise of the battle raging on outside the house and the sound of his beating heart thundering in his ears, Absalom heard it, the slow clicking of a 98K rifle and the low whispering of voices speaking German coming from one of the two rooms at the top of the stairs. "Kommen Sie mit den Händen up," Absalom shouted as it was one of the few phrases that he knew in German, and as he waited for a response Absalom took a firmer grip on the Thompson. His command was responded to in the form of a rifle shot, with the bullet striking him in the left side of his chest as the impact pushed him hard against the wall that had him dazed for a brief few seconds, but he was still able to fire his Thompson, and as the bullets poured from the barrel ripping through the wall and the half-closed door of the room as if they were both made of newspaper, he could hear the shouting cries of dying men coming from the room over the blasting of the Thompson. Quickly ejecting the spent clip, he reached for a fresh one from the ammo vest, and he saw where the bullet had struck him as it had firmly lodged itself in the cell of his ammo vest that he was now reaching for. Getting the one just below the damaged cell, he slipped the full clip into the Thompson, pulled the bolt back and cautiously made his way up the hallway. After taking a few steps past the first room he stopped. "These German bastards hide everywhere." Person's warning words echoed in Absalom's ears. Carefully and quietly retracing his steps, he moved back to the room he had passed while keeping his eyes fixed on the hallway ahead of him. When he reached the first room and looked in only to see the bodies of 3 dead German soldiers who had hidden in the room, and he saw that they all had been armed with 98K rifle rather than machine guns. If one of them had won, he knew he wouldn't be standing here now. As he was about to start back up the hallway, Absalom heard a doorknob turning, and as he scanned the room he saw via the mirror the wardrobe door slowly opening. Without hesitating, he quickly raised the Thompson and fired off a short blast. The body of a German SS soldier holding a semi-automatic rifle crumpled to the floor as he fell out of his hidden place. After he checked the closet and under the bed, Absalom left the bedroom and stepped back into the hallway. Then carefully and without making any noise he inched along to the next door that was a few feet from the room he had just left. As he passed the second room he saw the 2 dead Germans who had been manning the machine gun that was set up in the room. Careful to stay in the shadow of the room, Absalom looked to see if there were any hiding places that a German soldier could hide, and when he didn't see any he moved on to the last room. It was in the last room that he saw his own handiwork, and as he looked at the dead men he felt his stomach knotting up and forced himself not to weaken. Turning from the side he was about to go back up the hallway when he met Person coming toward him. "All clear up here?" Person asked, and saw an ash-faced Absalom nodding his head. "Good. Sarge wants us out in the yard," Person said, and started back down the stairs. By the time Absalom came out of the house, men and tanks were flowing across the bridge that minutes before was impassable. Even the sky gave no hint that there had been a struggle for the now half-destroyed farm as the sun shone in a cloudless sky. "So is this everybody?" McPherson asked as he looked at his men. "All who made it," Grayson replied. "Well, we'll rest here until—" McPherson started saying when he saw Valdez walking toward them with an old man, an elderly couple, a young woman, and 2 young children. "Where did you find them?" McPherson asked. "They were hiding in the basement," Valdez said, motioning to the house. "As near as I can make out, they got stuck here when the Germans started crossing the bridge." "Want me to take them back to town?" "No, I don't want you getting lost," McPherson said. "Scott here can take them back," he said, looking at Absalom. "You think you can handle that?" McPherson said with a smile. "Yes, sir," came Absalom's reply. For a truck driver you handle yourself really good," McPherson said as he held out his right hand to the young soldier. "Thanks for the ride across the bridge," McPherson added, flashing a crooked smile. "No problem, sir," Absalom said, shaking McPherson's hand. "Yeah, thanks. You're a real buffalo soldier," Person added as he held his hand out to Absalom. "Say, Grayson, you owe me $10, Person said, turning and looked at the weary-faced man. "And just how do you figure?" came a surprised response from Grayson, who was now sitting on his haunches as he finished smoking the cigarette he had lit 2 minutes before. "Well, you bet that old Absalom here would break and run," Person said. "Yeah, he broke all right," Pew quickly added, "ran right across that damn bridge, and with you bringing up the rear." "Yeah, hillbilly pay up," Harrison said as he reached out to Grayson with a large left hand. "You look crazy if you think," Grayson protested. "Pay up," McPherson said, giving Grayson a hard look that was shortly followed by a smile. A smile slipped across Absalom's face as he listened and watched what was happening to Grayson. Maybe this was the way frontline soldiers behaved when the pressure was off. That sense of relief of knowing that you had made it through the struggle with death, as afterward the realization of making it in one piece. It brought on such a jubilant state that the survivors expressed it with boyish teasing and ethnic taunts. "Well, Grayson, you can give me my 10 when you get back to the States," Absalom said, smiling. Like a radio knob turned to the off position, Absalom's remark caused the hazing that Grayson had been getting from the members of his squad to abruptly stop, and the once smiling and laughing group of men looked at him. "What? You don't think I'm going to pass up $10, do you?" Absalom replied with a serious look. Smiles once again broke out across everyone's face, even Grayson. "I'll see you guys around," Absalom said. "Come on, ma'am, let's go," he added, motioning to Rosemaria. Then she and her family followed him as he started to walk away. "Say, Absalom, wait," Grayson said, getting up and walked over to him. To everyone's surprise, Grayson reached and tore off his insignia patch in one pull. "It ain't $10, but it's something," Grayson said, holding out his right hand to him with the patch. For a brief moment there was an air of uneasy tension between the two, but it quickly vanished as Absalom reached for the patch from him and Grayson gave Absalom a firm handshake. "We never would have made it across that damn bridge without you," he added with a bright smile. "Thanks." Then, stepping back from Absalom, Grayson came to full parade attention and gave Absalom a crisp salute. Grayson's gesture was quickly followed by the rest of the group coming to attention and saluting Absalom, who in turn saluted them in the same manner. "Well, I better get these people into town," Absalom said with a smile after returning their salutes. "Sure, kid, and take care," the smiling sergeant replied, and stood watching Absalom leading the bewildered LaLouvriere family back across the bridge to Armior. "Well, come on, girls, we ain't on no tea break," McPherson growled as he turned his attention back on what was left of his squad. He quickly wiped his right eye as he glanced at Absalom and the LaLouvriere family as they were crossing the bridge amidst the flooding flow of soldiers. "Damn crazy-ass kid," McPherson said softly as a smile flashed across his face. "Say, boy, look like you got yourself there a bunch of dangerous Germans," a soldier said, flashing a bright smile. "Yeah, shouldn't you be driving them in the truck? Or did they kill it?" A second one quickly added that got chuckles from several other soldiers that heard the remarks. Absalom paid little attention to the looks or the remarks that he got from them as he and the LaLouvrieres kept walking across the bridge toward the village. Looking at the shoulder patch that Grayson had given him moments before, Absalom knew that from this day forward it didn't matter what anyone, be they colored or white, would say about him, nor would he ever try to prove himself to them either. Even though it wasn't a medal, to Absalom it would be a cherished token that would forever remind him of the respect and gratitude he had won on the field of battle from his fellow brothers in arms. For gallantry and at the risk of his life while engaged in an action against the enemy of the United States during a military engagement against opposing German forces at the Armior Bridge on the 3rd of January 1945, Private Absalom Scott, supply driver of Abel Company of the 514th Quartermaster Corps, is hereby awarded the Silver Star. He, along with Private First Class Stan Person, a member of Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion 1st Army did engage and successfully lead the charge in the capturing of the Armior Bridge from elements of the German 5th Panzer Division. Realizing that both machine guns on the opposite end of the bridge must be silenced at all costs, Private Scott along with Private First Class Stanperson moved to do so under intense and hostile fire from German troops, as well as from both machine gun nest, heavy mortar, and artillery fire from hidden enemy batteries, which all added to the storm of destruction falling on the advancing American troops attempting to secure the village of Armior and capture said bridge from the German troops occupying the farm on the west side of the river. Both German machine gunners and several German troops that were dug in along the bank of the river had stopped Bravo Company of 2nd Battalion attempts of crossing the Armior Bridge. Suffering heavy losses on their first two previous attempts as well as having a Sherman tank and a T-48 that was knocked out of action during their second push to cross the Armior Bridge, a third attempt was made. Under the cover of the two destroyed American vehicles and a German half-track that were on the bridge, both Private Scott and Private First Class Person made their way along the left wall of the bridge while under heavy enemy fire by the German forces, as well as hidden German sniper fire. Leading the way armed only with his M1 rifle, Private Scott with complete disregard for his own safety did on two separate occasions while crossing the bridge stood up and faced the enemy fire, firing his weapon at the German troops' position on the west-left bank of the river. In taking such risk, Scott, an expert marksman with a M1 Garand, took out several German soldiers who were entrenched along that side of the river. On reaching the German side of the bridge and from behind the protection of the half-track, Private Scott single-handedly took out both German machine gun nests by hurling a grenade at each one. By his heroism, fearless determination, and supreme effort, Private Scott eliminated hostile German fire that had threatened to destroy more members of his fellow GIs, whereby his action that day on the bridge outside the village of Armior turned a desperate situation into victory for the advancing American forces. The citizens of Weston's Freedom Town have every reason to be proud and thankful for the soon safe return of. A smile lit the face of Mr. Eskew as he looked at the front page of the Weston's Freedom Town newspaper that would be delivered to homes and places of business the next day. Not that there was a need for the printing of the story that everyone in the town knew from its retelling, but his reason was to give the detailed facts he'd gotten from the War Department of the battle and what details the War Department left out. Members of the Scott family had filled in of the part that their son played in the action on the taking of the Armior Bridge that cold January day. Still, it was worth printing and a welcome break from the second-hand news that was so often in the Weston's Freedom Town Express, and this time the whole town would get more than a brief telling of the story. Unlike when Weston's Freedom Town's favorite son was seen in the newsreel down at the Common Theater a few months ago as George Patton pinned that silver star on Absalom. They should have given the boy the Medal of Honor, Charles said, looking over Askew's shoulder. That may be true, but still it's better than no medal at all for what he did. Askew replied. So when will he be back? His parents and that Sarah May worker went to pick him up from the train depot in Santa Fe this morning, Charles replied as he left out of the room. Well, I'm sure the boy is glad to be back home. Askew said softly to himself, you did us proud, son, very proud. Askew added, looking at the picture again of Absalom and General Patton. Cornerstone script stories where imagination is reality. Each story is an original work of fiction written by its author Kenneth G. Thibodeau.